Welcome to VPG's Virtual Water Cooler Chat podcast, where we share lessons and stories of women professionals to help empower other women and expand a greater circle of influence so we walk our journey with those who understand and appreciate us. Today, we'll chat with Samhitha Medatia. Samhitha is Senior Intellectual Property Counsel for Fidelity Information Services in Atlanta, Georgia. Her career began at Dow Corning Ltd, where she used her chemical engineering degree and training to research and develop innovative manufacturing methods for high-purity silica. After graduating from the George Washington University Law School, she started her legal career at Finnegan, Henderson, Farabow, Garrett Dunner, LLP, focusing on patent litigation and client counseling. Samhitha also served as a law clerk to the Honorable Jimmie V. Reyna at the United States Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit. At FIS, Samhitha is a key member of an impactful global team managing the company's valuable intellectual property. In her role, she has the opportunity to leverage her technical and legal skills to craft business-savvy solutions for her clients. Samhitha serves on the executive committee of the Atlanta IP Inn of Court and is an active member of the South Asian Bar Association of Georgia.
Hey, Samhitha, welcome to the show. I'm so honored to have you here. And, it's such a pleasure to have someone here who's been in this patent attorney journey. So, Samhitha, how did you choose your path to become a patent attorney? Do you think you picked the right path?
Yeah, so my journey to patent law started, I would say, maybe later than others. There are really no other attorneys in my family. My dad's a computer engineer. My mother was a Montessori teacher. We don't really know a lot of attorneys in our life. So growing up, I didn't have a lot of mentors in the legal field. But when I went into undergraduate school, I started my path to become a chemical engineer. And I graduated with that degree, and I started working at Dow Corning Corporation, which has now been sort of reorganized, but is now back part of the Dow organization. But when I started working as an engineer, I was working at this very unique part of the company where there's bench chemistry where you're doing molecule work and developing new formulations. And then there's production where you're in the field and making manufacturing level quantities of material. And I was sort of in the middle, taking the formulations and attempting to create different and efficient ways of scaling that up into production. And so part of my job really involved a lot of innovation and looking to see what other folks were doing in the market, what's available, how can we tweak things? Is there something out there that we can grow from and use as a starting point? So a lot of my job at that point was looking at patents and reading them and seeing what's new and what's out there. To get ideas and to sort of, have that brain trust with other engineers in this space. And so there's that part of the job. And then there was the part of the job in the field, tinkering, putting things together in the lab. And I found myself gravitating to, well, okay, it's going to take us, a few weeks to get things set up in the lab. I want to be in there reading more about what's going on. And let me learn a little bit more about how other people are doing things. And so I realized very quickly that part of the job can be a career if you go into the patent side. So I was with Dow Corning for about a year before deciding to make the decision to go to law school. And then when I went to law school, I knew I was looking for a program in intellectual property law. So I could really use that part of my training and interest and passion for learning into my legal career too. So I was very lucky to join George Washington University's program because they really do have a top intellectual property program, being in DC, being in kind of the nexus of where the federal circuit is, where the patent office is, and a number of great practitioners in the space too.
I love that. Sometimes curiosity is what leads us to our careers, right? You were curious about patents, you wanted to learn a little bit more, and you just went ahead and decided to go for it, right? And here you are today as, a patent lawyer. And how has that role changed now working in corporate from being an engineer to working for patent laws?
Yeah, so my transition first was to law school, and then I started working at my law firm Finnegan, and I did primarily IP litigation there in various forums. Um, and so that transition, you go from being in the patents every day to, if you're in a traditional litigation practice, there's a lot of litigation that is not just patents, right? It's all the rest of it. It's discovery. It's dealing with personalities. It's dealing with experts and trying to learn the technology, but also learn the rules of that court. So there's a lot of mixing of traditional patent work in patent litigation. And that same type of broadening and mixing happens when you make the transition to in-house, like I am now, where I am IP counsel for Fidelity Information Services. But first and foremost, I'm an advisor to the organization. And so that advice comes from a number of different areas of law and experience. Right. And so part of my job now is to, for example, advise on transactions that have an interesting IP element to it. And sometimes that advice really hinges on, is this a good business decision? Or is this, the law can say what it is, and we can craft clauses and terms to do what we want. But ultimately, is what we are saying we want, is that really a good choice? And so that's part of my job too, is really taking a more holistic view of what the law can do to support business goals.
I love that. And I know you mentioned that, there's no lawyers in your family, most of them came from in the engineering space. So when you made that transition, was your family supportive of it, or were they like, why are you doing this? You come from engineers. How could you? I was just curious.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. They did ask me a lot of questions like, are you sure about this? Do you really know what you're getting into? And honestly, my answer was not really. I mean, again, I didn't have a lot of folks to ask all those questions of. And so it was a little bit of instinct and gut. That this would be the right choice for me. The other kind of complicating wrinkle to the whole decision to go to law school at this time was, I graduated from law school in 2011, which just so happened to be part of that, with the recession, or it was a difficult time to come out of law school, and so leaving a what my parents might consider a very stable career, a very defined career pathway, to do something that to them was unusual, and they didn't have a lot of familiarity with it, and then to do that at a time where the legal market was kind of going through some shifts and changes. I'm sure they had a lot of questions, but I think for me, I've been very, very blessed to have a fulfilling career that is able to marry that technical side and my technical training with the legal side and that legal acumen, to have a very fulfilling career so far.
Thanks for sharing. And I love that. I know as parents, they just want the best for you, right? So when they don't know what they don't know, they get scared and they're like, are you sure you want to do this? I already laid out a path for you. Why are you going against the grain? And, because you wanted to forge that step, regardless of the circumstances, you were willing to do it. And because of that, here you are today. I mean, really in life, there's no guarantees, right? And I think as the world keeps having so many different, challenges that come up, we have to learn to embrace the unknown versus, having it control us. And so the more we can embrace it, the more we can create the opportunities we want. Seeing things in a different perspective, kind of like what you did. And so, I was just curious about your profession, right? Your legal profession, your journey. What was it like, especially as an Indian woman? I'm pretty sure there's some challenges, I mean, you look very young, so maybe sometimes they don't even take you seriously. I mean, I'm not making assumptions. I'm just, there's a lot of observations when it comes to female lawyers, especially Asian female lawyers. But was there any challenges for you in your journey?
Yeah, I will say, and I'll even take it a step back too, right? So I started in an industrial setting as an engineer. And I would say that even from that angle, it's not, maybe it's more common today, but I think there's still some room to grow in that area, where to have parity of men and women in the industrial field, where you're in your hard hat. I had my steel toe boots, and we were a union facility. And so to go into the lab, you do have to be comfortable with working with tools and being physical in the field. And so even from then, I would say, there is a challenge. The perception, your perception in the room can be, especially if you present, I'm not the tallest person in the room, in any room. I even went to go visit my son's school today, and I don't think I was the tallest person in that room. And my stature is not that of somebody that's, slightly larger. And so I think that what I draw on to present in a room like that is really being prepared and having the knowledge to know what I'm talking about, and having the knowledge to know what I don't know. So if there's questions that I have to ask to feel comfortable, I'm not shy to ask those questions. And I think that also gives a bit of respect from folks that have been doing this work for a long time, because you have the humility to know that you don't know everything. I think that goes a long way to help, earn that trust and respect with the folks that you're working with. So I will say that even started for me, at least back in my engineering days, and continues, through now, but now, I feel like since I've been working with the same folks for a few years, we've had that opportunity to really go through it together, and we've seen what all of our teammates can do, and kind of going through difficult patches or challenging projects together is really the best way to understand and know what your at least for what I hope my colleagues would recognize as my strengths, and maybe what I'm not so good at. And so we can balance each other out, and you build that trust through experience. And so even if the initial perception is not exactly, this is what I would counsel somebody, a mentor coming into this space, if your initial perception is not exactly what you hoped it would present, you can build your reputation through expertise and working hard and being prepared to work through difficult projects. So that's kind of how I've approached it. And, it's a little bit of, to the extent you can't control what other people do and think. And so all you can really do is control yourself. And if at the end of the day, you're happy with your performance, then, you have to be happy with that, and other people can think what they want.
I love that. And it makes, I didn't realize you went from like one male dominated space to another. And so I guess that might help for you, because you were able to handle the things in a different industry, right? Sometimes when we experience something, we can always transfer it. And I like that you mentioned, if you didn't know anything, you just decided to ask a question, because I'm a big believer in asking questions, right? Especially if I don't know, I will ask, right? And I don't really care if people think it sounds stupid or not, because for me, I would rather know than not know, right? And sometimes we have to bring our egos down and realize we don't know everything, right? And just ask the people who have more expertise than us. And so, like you mentioned, it builds trust, it builds the relationship. You have each other's respect, and it can go a long way, right? Back in the day, and I used to be so stubborn. I feel like if I had to ask for something, like something was wrong with me. And it could stem from just our culture, right? But yeah, I just love that you mentioned that, and how it really has helped you in your own career and build that relationship for the long haul, because you work with them every single day. So it makes sense, right? There's no point in fighting, you should all get along, right? Because it's a team effort. It's not just you. So I really love that. And I
will add one quick thing there too about asking questions. I'm somewhat new to this organization, and I think being new somewhere gives you a unique opportunity to ask those. Otherwise, I'm putting all the air quotes in the world, but those stupid questions that you think are just foundational. And hey, sorry, everybody probably already knows this, but I'm new. Can I ask this? And doing that here, I have found that oftentimes other people are wondering the same thing that I'm wondering, but don't feel the comfort level to ask the question. And so it is, I think, a skill of being, maybe this is from being an engineer, but certainly being an attorney, being able to break it down and ask those basic foundational questions that, okay, we're doing it this way, but it's based on what assumptions. I have found that's value that I can bring to any project that I'm on, because oftentimes people are doing things just because that's just how they're done, and no one's really, dug down to figure out why that is. And I think that's value that we can bring as attorneys.
That is so true. I love that you mentioned that, especially, growing up in an Asian culture, we do certain traditions and never question it, right? Not realizing, like, does it really help us or does it not help us, right? And then when we ask, of course, you have your Asian aunties are like, why do you keep asking? Just do it. Just do it. I'm like, but why though? I don't understand. And they're like, just do it, stop complaining and do it, right? But sometimes we really have to dig deep and figure out why we do certain things that we do so we can understand it. And maybe we can present that issue in a better way or find a better solution, right? Being able to dig deep and doing that. So I love that you mentioned that, because I think it's really important. Now, I realized that you also own a coffee shop, correct? I'd love to hear a little bit about that, because, here you are by day, you're a patent attorney. On the side, you also own a coffee shop. How did that start?
So I will have to give my proper deference to my husband, who does the lion's share on the coffee shop while also working full time. So my role is much more, I would say, taste tester than working on the daily there. But it takes, creating something out of a vision and out of a sheer want. That was something that is so different for us in our kind of day-to-day life, that navigating that to create a new business, it kind of activated all the neurons that we don't necessarily use every day. We both have kind of more traditional sort of corporate jobs. And so creating the coffee shop, it involved a more creative side of both of our brains to really say, okay, well, what is the vibe we want in this space? And how are we going to get from point A, which is an idea, to point B, which was finding a location, to point C, which is conducting a renovation, and then, seeking out planning and decorating the space and menu planning. All of that, the type of work that you have to do to open a restaurant just fires from different cylinders than are kind of traditional jobs. But it's been a lot of fun. Tons of time. Certainly, it's been our fourth baby, but it's rewarding to walk in at the shop and just see kind of folks that are enjoying the community that we've built. Really taking advantage of the space and having feeling like we're part of something in that Atlanta community. It's been really neat.
That's awesome. And have you been able to take some of the things you learned from running a coffee shop into your corporate job and vice versa?
Oh, that's a good question. So again, in terms of running, I'm mostly just the taste tester as I'm walking in. But I will say, part of being a business owner is strict cash flow management, right? At the end of the day, a restaurant is a tough business. But it does make you, very cost conscious, and just understanding kind of at an intuitive level, inflows and outflows, and mapping out, long-term planning. And all of that is the same for the budgets that I have to manage for litigations here at FIS, right? So I don't have an endless well to pull from, just like the coffee shop doesn't. And so I have to be a judicious decision maker on my budget, just as equally as I am on the coffee shop's budget, to know what's going to be important. How can we plan long-term planning? Are there places where we need to push, or are there places where we can pull back, depending on how we expect things to progress over the next few months? And so it's a lot of, in terms of budget management, I would say there's a lot of similarity, even if you're dealing with a restaurant or responding to a subpoena.
I love that, because it's crazy. Like, here you are as an attorney and you also have a coffee shop. And it's like, well, you can do both if you choose to, right? And you're not doing alone. Your husband's helping you too. And this coffee shop is more than just a coffee shop, right? It's something that the neighborhood can go to, right? Whether it's kids studying, girlfriends chatting, people just getting their morning coffee. It's like kind of like Cheers, where everybody knows your name, right?
Exactly.
But in a form of a coffee shop, of course.
Well, I will say we were able to secure a beer and a wine license too. So depending on the time, it might be more like Cheers than not. So
I love that. And besides, running a coffee shop with your husband, what are some other things that you do, outside of the corporate job?
Yeah, so we have, our family is I would say bustling at this point. We have 3 young children, we have a dog. And it's just, there's always something going on with them. So I will say my interests kind of take a back seat at this stage to all of the kids' interests, because we are bouncing around on the weekends, taking them from point A to point B and all over the place. But it is fun. It's a fun part of life. I think the stage right now where it's a little crazy, it's a little hectic. But there's a saying, what is it, that the days are long, but the years are short. And so looking back at this time, I'm sure we'll think it's going by in a blur. I mean, it's going by in a blur now. So we definitely enjoy that time that we can get with the kids and the family.
Yeah, it's definitely, that time will go by so fast, and you're going to be like, where did they how did they grow up so fast, in a blink of an eye? And so I love that you mentioned, like, sometimes you have to take a step back to spend time with your family to, figure out what they love and don't love, and just have that quality time that they can remember as well. And I know you also serve in a lot of, organizations such as the South Asian Bar Association in Georgia, also the Atlanta IP in of court. I mean, what's your role in those organizations?
Yeah, so I love the South Asian Bar Association, and I was on the board for that organization when I lived in Washington, D.C. a number of years ago. And so when we first moved to Atlanta about 5 years ago, that was the first organization that I reached out to really get a footing in the legal market here in Atlanta, and to understand where folks are, what types of industries people are working in my community. And I will say that this has been such a great resource for just meeting people, making friends, right, in a new city. It's a smaller organization. And I think the intimacy of that, the group that's very active on the South Asian Bar Association in Georgia, has been a welcome environment for me, especially these last few years. A number of the folks that I served on the board with, we all just so happened to have children around the same time, which was not at all, planned or anything, but it's just sort of the stage of life that we all were in. And so it's been a nice kind of sense of community to have. And the same with the Atlanta IP Inn of Court. By design, the Inn of Court is limited membership, kind of more intimate setting. And that's been really nice to understand all the folks that work here in the IP space and have that networking kind of on a more intimate level. And it provides opportunities to serve in leadership roles as well at the organization. So I'm on the executive committee for that organization to help kind of plan strategy and how the year's going to go. So both organizations, I would say, have been very helpful for me, which, I moved to Atlanta 5 years ago. It feels like, a long time ago, but in some ways it's really not that long ago, because when I moved here, we were expecting, and so I had a maternity leave, and then we had our next kid. And so I had some, more time to recover. And then it was the pandemic. And so I feel like we've just been kind of bouncing around from family obligations. And then obviously the pandemic, we were, on lockdown for a while. So now, even though it's been 5 years, it's kind of not really 5 years, in what the experience time. And so now it's really been a nice year this year and last, kind of midway through last year, where we started to really be able to go out more and have more in-person events and see folks and, engage in my children's school community more. So it's been a welcome change, I would say, like these last 18 months.
I love that. And Can you believe 3 years ago we were all on lockdown? It's just so crazy. Just think.
I pass time with the children's birthdays now. And my son, my oldest, is a true leap day baby. So he was born on February 29th. And so we made his first, which was really his fourth birthday, a big deal, right? And we took the whole family down to Disney World. We had grandparents coming, and we all went there for the week. And, February 29th, 2020 is when we were there, and we came home and the whole world shut down. And so really, in some respects, we're still at his fourth birthday party 3 years ago, and just still kind of mentally in that same space. I feel like the world stopped at that point. But
yeah. I'm glad, things are starting to open again. There's more in-person events, more networking, because virtual is great. Don't get me wrong, right? Without it, I don't know if the world was able to survive from the lockdown, but being in person is a totally different thing, right? You just, it just makes a big difference when you can see someone in person. And it's just funny sometimes because, we all sit, we all are just in our Zoom photos. And then when you see someone in person, it's like, wow, you're so tall, or, oh, I didn't know you were this, like the height differences. It's so funny.
I never get that. Oh, I thought you were that tall. I never get that.
Yeah. But, to anyone who's listening to your episode, loving your journey, your story, and they're in a similar journey to becoming a patent attorney or just wanting to know more about the legal profession, what are some tips or words of wisdom that you would give to them?
Yeah, so I would say, first and foremost, I know it's probably been, beaten a dead horse, but I think it's worth reiterating. This industry is really about your relationships and connections. Being brilliant, being a good attorney, and being a good scientist, if you're coming from that background, it's almost like that's table stakes, right? Because everyone that seeks this profession tends to be, somebody that seeks information and absorbs it and assimilates it in a very, interesting way. So that's really table stakes. That's the skills for doing your job. But to really succeed in this business, in this industry, you have to build good relationships, and you have to leave folks with a good impression of yourself. And that just takes a lot of practice and a lot of, I think, work, right? Because as you meet people, you have to follow up and continue conversations and check in with folks. And especially if you're seeking advice, to come to those conversations somewhat prepared for what you want to ask and what you want to understand from the person that you're hoping to learn from. And I think that really goes a long way in this field. And to that point, I always, when I speak to folks that are kind of more starting out, or one of my friends teaches an adjunct class at Emory Law for students that have in-house internships. And so I've done this for a few years now, kind of giving them a lay of the land of what work I do and, how my career path had progressed. And so this is the advice that I would give them as well, is feel free to reach out to people. I think that folks that have something to offer, help to give in this field are willing to do so. And sometimes our own shyness or hesitancy can block us from reaching out. But I would encourage anyone to, reach out to me as a resource, or others, that they're comfortable with talking to. I think people are very willing to help in this industry, or at least share experiences. And so definitely take advantage of those opportunities.
Thanks for sharing all those great tips. And I love that you mentioned about reaching out to people, because I'm one who reaches out to people. And for me, it's important, especially as women, right? We got to go out there and just make the first move and be okay with it, right? Gone are the days where people say it's not ladylike, it's too shameful. It's, things in reaching out is where we can create those opportunities, where we can make a name for ourselves, be taken seriously, because we know what we want and we're just going to go after for it, right? Like, we're going to make the connections, we're going to do the work, we're going to show up. And that speaks a lot, right? They always say actions speak louder than words. And so when people see your actions and they're inspired by it, they're going to be like, well, I'd love to work with you, or I'd love to collaborate with you, and things like that. So I love that, because I think, it's not said enough, right? I mean, the movies doesn't help when they're always like, Prince Charming's going to come and save you.
Oh, right.
In real life, the only person who can save you is yourself, right? But then, having a support system along the way, kind of like this podcast, like you mentioned, you said, reach out to me, right? If you need help, reach out to me, because I can help you. And I think that is so important as well, especially when we've been told that asking for help is a sign of weakness or a handout. It really isn't. It's where we can create change, when we can do things together. And so if our listeners did want to reach out to you for some advice, or maybe they just want a cup of coffee in Atlanta,
Yes.
How can they reach out? How can they connect with you?
So the best way to get me is probably on LinkedIn. And you can find me there, and always, add me as a contact, or send me a message. And don't be surprised if I do the same for some of your followers as well. And to grow both of our networks, I think it's nice to know that there's others that are kind of in the same space and looking out for each other, and building that nice community, just like at the shop.
I love it. And thanks again for being on the show. It was so great to connect with you, to chat with you. And yeah, I just love, learning from other people, learning about their stories, learning about what they had to go through to get to where they are today. So thank you again, Samhitha.